Dr. Emily Richardson had examined thousands of vintage photographs during her 15 years as chief archivist at the New York Public Library's Digital Preservation Department. Broadway street scenes from the 1890s were nothing unusual. The library's collection contained dozens of them, documenting the bustling commercial heart of Manhattan as it transformed from a quiet thoroughfare into America's entertainment capital. But this particular photograph, donated by the estate of antiquarian collector Harold Steinberg, would challenge everything historians thought they knew about Broadway in 1898. The image appeared routine at first glance. Street vendors lined the sidewalks of Broadway near what would later become Times Square, their wooden carts filled with fruit, newspapers, and various wares. Horse-drawn carriages navigated between pedestrians, while well-dressed gentlemen, top hats and ladies in long bustles, moved purposefully along the cobblestone street. The photographer had captured a typical bustling day in Manhattan's growing commercial district. Emily began the standard digitization process, scanning the albumin print at high resolution to preserve its details for the library's digital archive. The photograph measured 8 by 10 inches, mounted on period-appropriate cardboard backing. The image quality was exceptional for 1898, showing remarkable clarity and contrast that suggested the work of a professional photographer rather than an amateur. Documenting street life, as the high-resolution scan appeared on her computer monitor, Emily noticed something that made her pause. In the bottom right corner of the photograph, partially obscured by shadows and the bustle of street activity, was something that shouldn't exist. A small section of storefront displayed what appeared to be electric signage, not the simple gas lamps or painted wooden signs typical of the era, but an illuminated display with lettering that seemed to glow against the darker background. Emily adjusted the contrast and brightness settings, trying to make out the text. What she saw made her hands tremble as she reached for her magnifying glass. The sign clearly read, "Kodak, capture every memory in modern sans serif lettering," accompanied by what appeared to be the familiar yellow and red Kodak logo that wouldn't be introduced until 1971. Emily's first instinct was to assume the photograph was a modern recreation or an elaborate fake, but everything else about the image screamed authenticity. The paper showed appropriate aging. The chemical composition of the albumin print was consistent with 1890s photography techniques, and the mounting materials matched the period exactly. She had developed an expert eye for detecting photographic forgeries, and this image passed every test except for that impossible signage. She decided to consult with Dr. Marcus Chen, a specialist in 19th-century urban photography at Columbia University. Dr. Chen had written definitive works on early commercial photography in New York and had access to authentication equipment that could definitively date photographic materials. When Dr. Chen arrived 3 days later, his reputation preceded him. He had authenticated photographs for major auction houses, debunked numerous forgeries, and his expertise was considered unquestionable in academic circles. Emily showed him the photograph without mentioning her concerns about the corner detail, curious to see if he would notice the anomaly independently. Dr. Chen spent 2 hours examining the photograph under various lighting conditions and magnification levels. His verdict was unequivocal. The photograph was authentic, created in 1898 using period-correct techniques and materials. The paper, the chemical processes, even the specific type of mounting adhesive, all dated to the correct time period. Then, Emily directed his attention to the corner. Detailed. Dr. Chen's expression changed from professional confidence to bewildered confusion as he focused his magnifying equipment on the impossible signage. The Kodak logo and modern typography were clearly visible, yet they appeared to be integral to the original photograph rather than later additions or manipulations. "This is impossible," Dr. Chen muttered, adjusting his equipment again and again. "The signage shows the same aging patterns as the rest of the photograph. It's not a later edition or double exposure, but it can't exist in 1898. Emily felt a familiar chill as she remembered reading about similar cases of photographic anomalies. The recent discovery of the supernatural Whitmore daguerreotype had opened discussions in academic circles about photographs that seemed to capture impossible images. Could this Broadway street scene be another example of temporal photography? Images that somehow captured events or objects from different time periods. If you're already intrigued by this impossible photograph, prepare yourself for what happens when digital analysis reveals the full extent of the temporal anomaly. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this investigation is about to uncover evidence that challenges our understanding of time itself. Dr. Chen suggested they subject the photograph to advanced digital analysis, using the same enhancement software that had revealed the supernatural elements in the Whitmore-daguerreotype case. The software could isolate different layers of the image, analyze lighting patterns, and detect inconsistencies that human eyes might miss. The results were even more disturbing than the initial discovery. As the enhancement software worked pixel by pixel, additional anomalies began to emerge throughout the photograph. What had initially appeared to be a simple 1898 street scene was revealed to contain elements from multiple time periods, all seamlessly integrated into a single image. A woman walking near the center of the photograph wore what appeared to be a modern wristwatch, clearly visible when the image resolution was increased. Several of the period-appropriate clothing items showed manufacturing techniques that wouldn't be developed until the mid-20th century. Most shocking of all, one of the horse-drawn carriages in the background showed tire treads on its wheels, rubber pneumatic tires that weren't commercially available until 1895, and wouldn't become common on carriages for another decade. But these historical inconsistencies paled in comparison to what the software revealed when it analyzed the architectural background of the scene. The building's lining Broadway in the photograph showed a mixture of construction techniques spanning nearly a century. Some structures displayed the Castilian architecture typical of the 1890s, but others showed clear evidence of steel frame construction that wouldn't become standard until after 1900. Most impossible of all, one building in the far background displayed what appeared to be Art Deco styling that wouldn't emerge until the 1920s. Emily and Dr. Chen found themselves staring at a photograph that appeared to document not just a single moment in 1898, but a convergence of multiple time periods somehow captured in a single frame. The implications were staggering. If authentic, this photograph suggested that time itself might not be as linear as assumed. Could certain locations or circumstances create temporal anomalies where past, present, and future coexist simultaneously? They decided to research the exact location where the photograph was taken. Using historical maps and architectural records, they determined that the image was captured at the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street, the location that would later become the heart of Times Square. What they discovered about that specific corner of Manhattan added another layer of mystery to their investigation. The intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street had been the site of unusual phenomena for decades before, and after 1898, newspaper archives from the New York Tribune contained numerous reports of temporal disturbances in the area, witnesses describing seeing people in clothing from different eras, buildings that appeared and disappeared, and sounds from both the past and future echoing through the streets. Most of these reports had been dismissed as urban legends or the hallucinations of overworked city residents. But now, with a photographic document that seemed to capture temporal convergence, these historical accounts took on new significance. Emily found a particularly relevant article from the October 15, 1897, edition of the New York Tribune. Witnesses report strange occurrences at the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street, where passers-by claimed to see figures dressed in clothing from decades past, walking among modern pedestrians. Several reliable citizens have reported hearing the sounds of automobile horns, though no such vehicles were present. Local police dismissed these reports as urban folklore, but the consistency of the accounts suggests something unusual may be occurring at this prominent intersection. The article continued with eyewitness accounts that precisely matched elements visible in the enhanced photograph. Witnesses described seeing a woman wearing a timepiece on her wrist, unusual wheel designs on carriages, and building facades that seemed to shift between different architectural styles. Dr. Chen suggested they consult with theoretical physicist Dr. Sarah Martinez at MIT, who had published papers on temporal mechanics and the possibility of time convergence points in urban environments. Dr. Martinez had theorized that certain locations with high electromagnetic activity could create temporal echoes, where different time periods briefly overlapped. When Dr. Martinez examined the photograph and the historical accounts, her response was both exciting and terrifying. This location shows all the characteristics I've theorized for a temporal convergence point, Dr. Martinez explained. The intersection of multiple electromagnetic fields, from subway construction, telegraph lines, and early electrical systems, could theoretically create conditions where linear time becomes unstable. If my calculations are correct, this photograph may have captured multiple temporal layers simultaneously. She continued. The subway construction beneath Broadway in the 1890s involved massive excavation that could have disrupted underground electromagnetic fields, combined with the increasing density of telegraph and early telephone lines overhead. The area would have been a perfect storm of electromagnetic activity. Dr. Martinez's analysis suggested that the photograph wasn't showing events from different time periods occurring simultaneously, but rather multiple time periods bleeding through into the single moment when the photographer pressed the shutter. The camera had somehow captured temporal echoes, glimpses of the same location, at different points in history. But if this was true, what other impossible moments might be documented in similar photographs from the same era and location? Emily began systematically searching through the library's collection of Broadway photographs from the 1890s and early 1900s. What she discovered was a pattern of temporal anomalies that had gone unnoticed for over a century. Multiple photographs from the Broadway and 42nd Street area showed similar inconsistencies. A 1895 image contained a street lamp design that wouldn't be installed until 1903. An 1899 photograph showed a woman carrying what appeared to be a modern handbag with a zipper closure. Those zippers weren't invented until 1917. A 1901 street scene included a building with architectural details that matched structures built in the 1920s. Each individual anomaly could have been dismissed as a mistake in dating or attribution, but together, they painted a picture of an intersection where time itself seemed to be unstable, allowing glimpses of past and future to bleed through into documentary photographs. The implications extended far beyond academic curiosity. If certain locations could experience temporal convergence, what did that mean for our understanding of history? How many historical accounts had been dismissed as fiction when they were actually documenting real temporal anomalies? Emily decided to take the investigation one step further. She wanted to visit the modern Times Square location and use electromagnetic detection equipment to see if the temporal disturbances were still occurring. On a cold November morning, exactly 126 years after the original photograph was taken, Emily and Dr. Martinez stood at the corner of Broadway and 42nd Street. With sophisticated electromagnetic monitoring equipment, the bustling modern Times Square bore little resemblance to the quiet commercial district captured in the 1898 photograph. But the intersection itself remained essentially the same. Almost immediately, their equipment began registering unusual readings. The electromagnetic field sensors detected patterns that Dr. Martinez described as impossible under normal physics. The readings suggested multiple overlapping temporal frequencies, as if different time periods were indeed occupying the same space simultaneously. It's as if this location exists in multiple time streams at once, Dr. Martinez explained as she watched the fluctuating readings. The electromagnetic signatures we're detecting match my theoretical predictions for a stable temporal convergence point. As they continued monitoring, something extraordinary occurred. Dr. Martinez's equipment registered a massive spike in temporal activity at exactly 11:47 a.m. for approximately 30 seconds. The electromagnetic readings suggested that multiple time periods were fully overlapping at that exact location. Emily quickly took digital photographs of the intersection during the temporal spike. When she later examined the images on her computer, she was amazed to find that the modern photographs showed the same kind of temporal layering as the 1898 image. In the background of her modern photographs, barely visible but definitely present, were ghostly images of the horse-drawn carriages, the period-dressed pedestrians, and the vintage storefronts from over a century earlier. The temporal echo was still occurring, still allowing glimpses of the past to bleed through into the present. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As Emily enhanced the modern photographs, she noticed a familiar figure in the historical layer of the image, standing near the corner where the original photograph had been taken. Barely visible among the ghostly 1898 street scene was a man holding what appeared to be a camera dot. The figure was photographing the same intersection, apparently documenting the same temporal convergence that Emily was now studying. But this photographer was clearly from the 1898 time period. Based on his clothing and equipment, Emily realized she was looking at the original photographer, who had captured the impossible 1898 street scene. He had somehow been aware of the temporal anomaly and had deliberately positioned himself to document it. This revelation changed everything about their understanding of the case. The 1898 photograph wasn't an accidental capture of temporal convergence. It was the work of someone who understood the phenomenon and was intentionally documenting it. Emily began researching historical records for any mention of photographers who might have been studying temporal anomalies in the 1890s. What she found was the story of Dr. Cornelius Blackwood, a professor of physics at Columbia University, who had abandoned conventional academic work to pursue what he called chronological photography. You're about to discover how Dr. Blackwood's investigation led to one of the most dangerous discoveries in scientific history. Make sure you're subscribed because what happens next will change how you think about the nature of reality itself. Dr. Cornelius Blackwood had been a respected physicist until 1892, when he began publishing papers about temporal mechanics that his colleagues considered pure fantasy. He theorized that certain locations could experience what he called chronological instability, where the normal flow of time became disrupted. His academic career was destroyed when he presented a paper claiming to have photographic evidence of temporal convergence. The university dismissed his work as fraudulent, and he was quietly forced into early retirement. But Blackwood didn't abandon his research, he simply moved it underground. Emily found Blackwood's personal papers in the Columbia University archives, filed away and forgotten for over a century. His journals contained detailed maps of Manhattan locations where he had detected electromagnetic anomalies. And at the center of his research was the intersection of Broadway and 42nd Street. Blackwood's notes from November 1898 matched exactly with the conditions captured in the mysterious photograph. The chronological instability at Broadway and 42nd reaches maximum intensity during the morning hours of the 15th day of each month. During these periods, multiple temporal layers become visible simultaneously. I have successfully documented these convergences using photographic techniques, though the scientific community refuses to acknowledge my findings. His journal continued, with observations that sent chills down Emily's spine. I have observed figures from future time periods walking among present-day pedestrians. Their clothing, technology, and mannerisms are clearly from decades yet to come. Most disturbing, I have occasionally seen modern individuals who appear to be observing and documenting these same phenomena, suggesting that knowledge of chronological instability persists into future generations. Emily realized that Dr. Blackwood had seen her and Dr. Martinez during their investigation, not as it happened in the present, but as a temporal echo visible from his 1898 perspective. The implications were if Blackwood could see the future researchers studying his work, and if Emily could capture ghostly images of his past documentation efforts, then time at this intersection wasn't just unstable, it was completely non-linear. But Blackwood's research had led him to discoveries that went far beyond academic curiosity. His later journal entries revealed that he had learned to predict and navigate the temporal convergences, eventually developing techniques for deliberate time travel. His final entries, dated December 1899, contained warnings that modern researchers would find deeply disturbing. The chronological instability is not natural. Something beneath the intersection is causing these temporal disturbances. My investigations have revealed evidence of a structure or device buried deep underground, predating human settlement of Manhattan Island. This technology appears to be manipulating time itself, possibly as part of a larger system spanning multiple locations globally. Blackwood's warnings continued. The temporal convergences are increasing in frequency and intensity. I fear that continued electromagnetic development in the city will eventually destabilize the phenomenon entirely, potentially creating a chronological catastrophe that could affect all of human history. His final journal entry, dated December 31, 1899, was a single sentence: "I have seen the end, and I must prevent it." Dr. Cornelius Blackwood disappeared on January 1, 1900. No trace of him was ever found, and his disappearance was never investigated. His research was sealed away and forgotten. Emily shared Blackwood's warnings with Dr. Martinez, who immediately understood the implications. If an ancient technological device was indeed buried beneath Times Square, and if modern electromagnetic activity was destabilizing its operation, then the heart of Manhattan could be sitting on a temporal bomb that could affect all of history. They decided they needed to investigate the underground areas beneath the intersection. Using city engineering records, they obtained access to the subway tunnels and utility corridors that ran beneath Broadway and 42nd Street. What they found in the deepest sub-basements confirmed Blackwood's most troubling theories. Approximately 60 feet below street level, beyond all modern construction and utility installations, they discovered evidence of a structure that predated any known human activity in the area. The walls showed construction techniques that didn't match any known historical building methods. using materials that appeared to be both ancient and impossibly advanced. Dr. Martinez's electromagnetic equipment went haywire the moment they entered the underground chamber. The temporal readings were off the charts, suggesting massive chronological instability that was being artificially maintained by some kind of technology embedded in the structure itself. But the most shocking discovery was what they found at the center of the underground chamber, a complex mechanical device that appeared to be part clockwork, part electronics, and part something that defied classification entirely. The machine was clearly still active, its various components moving in patterns that seemed to follow no recognizable logic. Inscribed on panels around the device were symbols that didn't match any known language, but also appeared to be somehow familiar, as if Emily and Dr. Martinez had seen them before in dreams or half-remembered experiences. As they documented the device, they began to understand that they were looking at technology that could control the flow of time itself. The electromagnetic signatures emanating from the machine matched perfectly with the temporal anomalies they had detected above ground. But they also realized they were not the first modern researchers to discover this underground chamber. Evidence scattered around the device suggested that others had found and studied it over the decades. They found research notes in multiple languages, some dating back to the early 1900s, others as recent as the 1980s. Each group of researchers had apparently reached the same conclusion. The device was extraterrestrial in origin, and it was designed to monitor and occasionally adjust human temporal development. The most recent research notes contained warnings that chilled Emily to her core. According to calculations left by previous investigators, the device's chronological manipulation had been gradually increasing in intensity over the past century. The temporal convergences that had been rare and localized in Blackwood's time were becoming more frequent and widespread. The notes suggested that the device was approaching some kind of critical threshold. If the calculations were correct, the machine would soon reach a point where temporal stability could no longer be maintained. The result would be what the researchers called a chronological cascade, a complete breakdown of linear time that could affect all of human history simultaneously. The most recent notes were dated December 2019, just months before the global pandemic began. The final entry was a desperate warning. The device is accelerating its modifications to the timeline. Major historical disruptions are imminent. We must find a way to shut it down before it destabilizes all of human chronological development. Emily realized that she and Dr. Martinez might be looking at the explanation for the strange temporal disruptions that many people had reported experiencing in recent years. The sense that time was moving differently, that events were occurring in impossible sequences, that reality itself seemed to be becoming unstable. The underground device wasn't just creating localized temporal anomalies at Times Square. It was manipulating the entire human timeline. And that manipulation was reaching a critical point. But as they studied the ancient technology, they also realized that shutting it down might not be possible without risking even greater chronological catastrophe. The device appeared to be deeply integrated into the fundamental structure of space-time in the area. Any attempt to disable it could trigger the very temporal collapse it was apparently designed to prevent. Emily and Dr. Martinez found themselves in an impossible position. They had discovered technology that could explain many of the temporal anomalies throughout human history. But they also possessed knowledge that could potentially destabilize all of reality if mishandled. As they prepared to leave the underground chamber, Dr. Martinez's equipment detected another massive temporal spike. For a moment, the air around the ancient device shimmered, and Emily caught a glimpse of other figures in the chamber, researchers from different time periods, all studying the same machine, all reaching the same terrifying conclusions. She saw Dr. Cornelius Blackwood documenting the device in 1899. She saw teams of scientists from the 1940s, the 1960s, the 1980s, and most disturbing of all, she saw what appeared to be researchers from future decades, their faces grim with the knowledge of what the device's continued operation would ultimately mean for humanity. In that moment of temporal convergence, Emily understood that she and Dr. Martinez were part of a long chain of investigators who had discovered this ancient technology and struggled with the impossible choice it presented. Each generation had faced the same dilemma: attempt to disable a device that could destroy human timeline, or allow it to continue its manipulation of history with unpredictable consequences. The temporal spike faded, leaving Emily and Dr. Martinez alone with their terrible knowledge. As they returned to the surface, Emily realized that their investigation of the impossible 1898 photograph had led them to one of the most significant discoveries in human history, and also one of the most dangerous. They now possessed evidence that human history had been subject to artificial manipulation for centuries, possibly millennia. But they also understood that this knowledge came with enormous responsibility. Any public revelation of the underground device could trigger panic, government intervention, or attempts to exploit the technology that could result in the very chronological catastrophe they were trying to prevent. Emily made the decision to document everything and seal the records. Following the example of previous researchers who had discovered the device, the 1898 Broadway photograph and all related materials were classified and stored in a secure archive, accessible only to future investigators who might be better equipped to handle the temporal crisis. But she also established a monitoring system to track the device's activity and the frequency of temporal anomalies in Manhattan. If the ancient technology did approach the critical threshold that previous researchers had calculated, there would need to be people prepared to take action. The mysterious photograph of Broadway street vendors in 1898 had seemed like a simple archival curiosity when Emily first examined it, but it had led her to the discovery of technology that could rewrite history itself, and to the understanding that humanity's past, present, and future were all far more fragile than anyone had imagined. As she filed the final reports in the secure archive, Emily reflected on the irony that the most important discovery in human history would have to remain secret, known only to a select few who understood the terrible responsibility that came with such knowledge. The ancient device beneath Times Square continued its mysterious operation, maintaining the delicate balance between temporal stability and chronological manipulation. And somewhere in the quantum layers of time surrounding that busy intersection, the ghosts of past researchers continued their eternal investigation, forever documenting the impossible convergence of all human history at the crossroads of Broadway and 42nd Street. But Emily knew that this was not the end of the story. The device's calculations suggested that the critical threshold was approaching rapidly. Within decades, possibly years, someone would have to make the ultimate choice between preserving human history as it existed or risking everything to break free from the artificial manipulation that had shaped civilization itself. The 1898 photograph of street vendors had revealed far more than temporal anomalies. It had unveiled the greatest secret in human history and the greatest threat to humanity's future. The clock was ticking, both literally and temporally, toward a confrontation with forces that had been manipulating human development since before recorded history began. And in the depths beneath Times Square, the ancient device continued its patient work, counting down toward the moment when all of human time would converge into a single, impossible instant that would determine the fate of reality itself. If this story has left you questioning the nature of time and reality, you're not alone. Share it with others who are ready to consider possibilities that challenge everything we think we know about history and existence. Subscribe to stay informed about discoveries that could reshape our understanding of the universe. And remember, the next time you walk through Times Square, you might be stepping through multiple layers of time simultaneously, witnessed by researchers from past and future who are all trying to solve the same impossible mystery that threatens the very fabric of human existence. The Broadway photograph that started it all remains in its secure archive, a seemingly simple image that documents the most complex discovery in human history. And somewhere in the quantum shadows of that 1898 street scene, the truth about humanity's manipulated timeline waits to be fully understood by those brave enough to face the consequences of ultimate knowledge.